Welcome to the Sacred Medicine Podcast. My name is Margaret Romero. I'm a Columbia-trained functional medicine nurse practitioner, and here I uncover the truth behind chronic illness so that you can finally heal. I'm a women's health and hormone expert and love empowering women to finally live their life fully and powerfully through optimal health. This is the Sacred Medicine Podcast. For another week of the Sacred Medicine Podcast. Thank you so much for being back here this week. And this week we have a very special guest, Dr. Valerie Rein, and we are talking all about the patriarchy. She wrote a book called Patriarchy Stress Disorder, the invisible inner barrier to women's happiness and fulfillment. Now, I had her book. I was like, oh my goodness. She needs to be on the podcast to tell other women about this. It's amazing the wisdom that this woman has regarding the patriarchy and the oppression for women and how generationally it has been passed on. The trauma of it has been passed on for so long, and how we are still living that out today. And what's beautiful about this interview is that as a woman, I'm sitting here like, oh my God, yeah, I do this. Women, collectively do this still. And I want us, and you know that I am so pro-women empowerment. I just want us all to be at our best, just feeling so much strength within ourselves to conquer whatever comes our way. So when we were having this conversation, I'm thinking we as women collectively need to know. And the more we're aware, the more we're able to sort of break through these barriers. My goodness, it's about time. And so there's so much we talk about. Oh my God. It was hard for me to even pick an actual clip from here because there were so many nuggets. If you're a woman listening to this, you need to just stop and take some time to listen because there is so much good in this. Pick up her book. It's a game changer. It's a life changer. And I just can't say enough about her work. I cannot say enough. So without further ado, let's do this. On to the show. You are listening to the Sacred Medicine Podcast. I am your host, Margaret Romero, and this week's guest is Dr. Valerie Rein. And she actually wrote this beautiful book. I love the title. It's called Patriarchy Stress Disorder, the invisible inner barrier to women's happiness and fulfillment. Valerie, thank you so much for being here.
Margaret, thank you so much for having me.
When I saw this, you know what? I don't even know how I came across your book because I hadn't been following you on Instagram. And so I'm trying to remember. I think, you know what? Someone posted it as like a story on Instagram. I can't remember who. Mm-hmm. And then I love the title. And so I immediately went on your page and then I bought your book. And so, yes, I want to talk about this so much. Mm-hmm. Why don't you just give us like a quick synopsis, what the definition of patriarchy is?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question to start. First, I want to put a disclaimer there that when I say patriarchy, I don't mean men. And when I say men, I don't mean patriarchy. Yeah. Well, what I do mean by patriarchy is a system of inequality and oppression that's been around for some 10,000 years, where the power, political, economic, and moral power and authority as well has belonged to men, and women have been excluded from it. So that is the system, and it has been a traumatic experience. that
Yes.
that exclusion and that oppression and disempowerment.
Oh, I love that definition. So, why is this? Tell me why this is considered a stress disorder. How is it affecting women?
Mm. Now that we have scientific evidence that trauma is genetically transmitted, that really changes the conversation about these things, about how we're affected by history. Because now, these days, we can argue that, well, women have access to the same opportunities, right, that men do. Well, we can make all the money we want to make, at least in theory. we can we can love who we love, or divorce, or whatever we want to do, really. However, that was not always the case. Women did not even have ownership of their own bodies nor their children, and certainly didn't have access to making their own living. A man was the only path to survival for a woman. And all of that created adaptations in our systems throughout generations of oppression. And these survival adaptations or trauma adaptations are, part of the parcel of those is the state of the nervous system that is constantly in some kind of hypervigilance. Just staying safe in the world where it's never been safe to be a woman, period. It's never been safe to be a woman under patriarchy. So our nervous system has been in the state of hypervigilance for a long time. And that's what it makes it stress disorder, because that state of hypervigilance of the nervous system translates into all sorts of things. It translates into chronic fatigue, adrenal fatigue. It translates into disconnection from our authentic selves, our authentic desires, from parts of our bodies. It blocks access to the fullest expression of who we authentically are sexually and in our work in the world, in our unconditional beauty. All of these things have always been unsafe and punishable for women. Women who reached for their authentic desires were burnt at the stake. They were locked up in asylums. They were excommunicated, ostracized, severely punished. And so that trauma lives in our systems. It lives in our DNA. It lives in our subconscious. And yes, we are in the world now where we have every opportunity. And the more we reach for these opportunities, the more we step into our power, the more our nervous system goes, unsafe, unsafe, unsafe. What are you doing? You're going to get killed. Of course, we don't go around thinking this way. But our nervous system is finding itself in a constant state of overdrive because our success actually feels unsafe to it. And that is the predicament. That is the essence of patriarchy stress disorder. That is the irony, right? I say in my book, they used to burn us at the stake, and now they just hand us the torches. There's just chronic pandemic of the burnout going on among high-achieving women. And there is more to the picture than us just, doing a lot of stuff. There is this hidden factor of the nervous system being in constant overdrive, and we need to take a look at that because it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah. I mean, I, in my practice, see so many women who are very powerful in their positions and CEOs of their own companies and very driven, very motivated, very successful. And they come to see me because they cannot get through the day. They may have all of the accolades, but they come to me because they have, like what you had mentioned, chronic fatigue. Their hormones are not in balance. They are losing their hair. They can't have children, they are so stressed, and their lab work comes back completely just wildly all over the place. So I've seen burnout, and I have also experienced burnout. I remember when I used to live in New Mexico, I don't know why, but I used to work 7 days a week, and I would work Monday through Friday at a family practice during the day. And then in the evening, it became an urgent care from 5 till I think it was like 8 o'clock. And so I would go from working all day to working the urgent care. Weekend, Saturday, Sunday, I was there all day, urgent care. Don't ask me why. I wasn't saving up for anything. But eventually, my body broke down and I got very sick. And I have seen that because of the work that I do, not my functional medicine work, but the work when I used to work in the emergency room, and I still do some urgent care on the side. I used to get so burnt out. The enormous amount of patients that I would see in one day, usually by myself. And at one point I said, this is not safe. This is not safe for patients. It's not safe for me to be seeing this many patients. There's no lunch break, 12-hour shifts. You're seeing 50 to 60 people. Wow. Everyone's very sick. And then I finally took a break. I dropped down to part-time. Eventually I quit. And now I just work maybe twice a week. And I'm feeling like even that's a little bit too much. Like eventually I just think sometime this year, I'm just going to fully just kind of quit that 100% and not do it. It's just, especially with COVID, it has been, I can't even imagine the nurses working in emergency rooms right now and all the providers, what this is doing to their bodies right now. The everyday fear, wearing that mask, the mask, when wearing we wear at least 2 masks, and then the headgear and covering your whole head and your whole body. It's suffocating. Yes. It's very suffocating. And I'll get out of the room and completely just take everything off. And I just feel myself like I'm starting to hyperventilate, like, oh, get me out of this. So I can imagine that it is what it's doing to all the providers out there.
Yeah. And in addition to the extreme stress that people are experiencing now, providers on the front lines and just basically everybody in their own ways, particularly women, right? Women were hit hard by the pandemic, particularly women of color. The amount of stress, the amount of things that fell on women's plates, both the things that we do and the emotional labor is extreme. And that is in addition to the intergenerational trauma that we already have in our systems. And when you said, well, I don't know why. I don't know why I worked 7 weeks, right? I mean, 7 days a week. I wasn't saving for anything. No, and those things, I went through that too, a very similar path. My book begins with my story of burnout and ending up in the emergency room with symptoms of a stroke, right?
Yes, I remember.
My body started shutting down. But a very similar path took me down that road. And the why comes down to, if we look at it through the lens of this intergenerational trauma and PSD, that puts us on the tracks of, first of all, our nervous system is already running hot. It's going. And being productive is one of the ways to actually manage, right? It's just one of the ways. It's a way to numb ourselves from the underlying pain, but it's a productive way. So it's celebrated in our society, right? We go to school, we work long hours. That's celebrated. Yes. That's almost like a badge of honor. And then, and when we're in it, oftentimes the only thing that can stop us is some kind of a crisis, sadly, be it burnout or breakdown of a relationship. And that's why we're having these conversations. Let us take a look at what's going on. And it's not our fault. It's not our fault. It's not even a fully conscious choice.
Right.
We
It wasn't
are
for
being
me.
driven. Yeah, neither for me. We are being driven. And now, from neuroscience, we know that our subconscious actually calls the shots. Our actions are decided in our subconscious, and our subconscious, right, operates on this very binary safe, unsafe paradigm. And it feels unsafe to slow down for women, which is very ironic, but it feels unsafe. So oftentimes women struggle with slowing down and relaxing without a glass of wine or a pill, just being on the go all the time, working all the time, taking care of things all the time. Even self-care seems like such a difficult chore for many women, just slowing down enough to, right, to just settle in. And again, it's not our fault. It's not our doing. It is a survival mechanism that our system runs hot, and it actually feels unsafe for it to slow down because it feels like being vulnerable. It feels like we're letting our guard down if we shift in from that heightened sympathetic nervous system response to parasympathetic to a relaxed state. And that's also a piece of knowledge that's also often missing from our understanding how we relate to our lives and even self-care. And then women beat themselves up for, I suck at self-care. I'm not doing enough self-care. But again, not our fault. And yes, we can do something about it. And it takes unpacking what is actually driving our subconscious in that direction.
Wow. And so you're saying that because we subconsciously, we're unaware that we're actually doing this, you are saying that it is due to sort of genetically it's been transmitted through our mothers and grandmothers. Is that what you were saying initially?
Yeah, and there are a couple of ways that the mechanism works. First, as I mentioned, the nervous system, because a moving target is hard to hit, right? The nervous system stays in hypervigilance and keeps going, keeps running hot, and that creates that illusion of safety, right? It's an adaptation mechanism that we have. And another mechanism is that through patriarchy, we carry this wound that I call the wound of worthlessness. Women are worth less than men. Our bodies, our lives, our minds, our ideas are worth less than men's, according to patriarchy. And so that puts us in this hamster wheel of achieving, gaining that conditional worth through accomplishments. Yeah. And it's like a drug, right? Like we get the dopamine hit that, we're accomplishing, but it also depletes and exhausts us. And at the end of the day, it is an unwinnable game. It's like the casino where the house always wins. And so, yeah, we may be gaining the chips of career advancement and more money in the bank and the degrees and whatnot. And then, but look, you're gaining weight, but look, you're aging, but look, whatever else patriarchy wants us to do and we're quote unquote failing at. And then the house takes the chips. Ultimately, conditional worth is an unwinnable game. We're never going to get that conditional worth settled. And shifting out of that, stepping out of that hamster wheel requires uncovering and healing that trauma, that wound of worthlessness that we have inherited.
So how do women even begin? Well, one is acknowledgement that that's what's happening, that who's running the show is not really the woman, but what's the trauma?
Yeah.
So how do you heal from that?
Right. Yeah, we begin by unpacking this, having these conversations. I have been on this journey of trying to figure out what's wrong with me since I was a little girl, getting these messages that, don't be so loud. People don't like that. Or don't be so smart. No one would want to marry you. Or go eat on dessert. You'll get fat. Or look, you're getting so skinny. You need to eat something. Like, I just kept getting those messages that, there was something wrong with me and I couldn't figure it out. And so I went on to study psychology, of course. What else would I study to figure out what's wrong with me once and for all and fix it? And I have been on this path for a while, for over 20 years, first trying to fix myself through all these different ways, and then coming to discover patriarchy stress disorder through my own burnout story, and making that connection between intergenerational transmission of trauma and the fact that women have been oppressed for thousands of years, and that's traumatic, right? And that really has changed everything. It finally answered the question of what's wrong with me, and the answer is nothing. And I hope everybody listening now takes it to heart too. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with any of us. We don't need fixing. And there is something that we carry that needs healing and understanding. And so I've poured all these decades of search and study and collecting ways of working with trauma through mind, body, and energy from the pioneers of this field, and pouring it into a system that anybody can learn, anybody can use these tools. And I have poured this system into 5 stages. And where we begin, the stage 1 is waking up in prison. I refer to PSD as the invisible inner prison that holds us back from our fullest authentic expression, our happiness, our fulfillment. And stage 1 is really about understanding that it is not us, it is not our fault, this is not our failing, and making this connection between intergenerational, collective, and personal traumas as well, that create these barriers to our fullest lives. And these barriers are trauma adaptations. They are things that are meant to keep us safe by keeping us from reaching for our authentic desires. And in stage 2, we actually unpack what these are. I call them prison guards, those trauma adaptations. They show up in the mind through stories, the inner critic, the imposter syndrome. These are all trauma adaptations. These are all prison guards. This is not we just arbitrarily made up. This is something that serves our survival, because if we start by judging ourselves and holding ourselves back from stepping into the spotlight, that prevents us from being judged and being ultimately punished for shining so brightly. And of course, it's not a conscious thing. It's not that we consciously believe those things, but the subconscious keeps us safe. And then the ways it does that is through creating these different stories. Like for example, you have a big opportunity to, increase your visibility, make this, big proposal or whatnot. And all of a sudden, the stories come up, like who would want to listen to me? Who do I think I am? Et cetera, et cetera. And then trauma adaptations show up also in the body. A lot of the things that you've already named, hormonal imbalances and, adrenal fatigue, in anxiety and depression. These also start as trauma adaptation. Anxiety being fight, flight reaction, depression being a freeze reaction in the nervous system. And when it becomes chronic and not addressed, then they become lingering conditions. Trouble sleeping, trouble relaxing, trouble just getting in touch with our sexuality, arousal, orgasms. These are all manifestations of trauma. These are all trauma adaptations. And the way we make choices and decisions and behaviors, like anything from, going to the fridge for that pint of Haagen-Dazs every time like something gets triggered in our system, to like online shopping, just drowning in work, drowning in streaming shows and food and drink. None of it is like, I don't see any of that as a flaw or a failing or a weakness. I see all of those as, survival adaptations, trauma adaptations, means to keep us safe. And so that's how we proceed with healing. We unpack them, then we go into rewiring the nervous system so that we can feel safe. We can feel safe. We can bring our subconscious up to date on the fact that, well, we're no longer burnt at the stake. Yes, there are a lot of triggers still, but we do have these opportunities, and a lot of things have actually shifted. It used to be very unsafe for a woman to be visible. Now, in many circumstances, it's actually more unsafe to be invisible, because visibility gains us access to opportunity, right?
Right.
To making more money, to creating more impact. So that old conditioning needs to be upgraded, and we do it through mind, body, energy tools. Then we go into uncovering and healing deeper layers of trauma. I call this stage tunnel digging the tunnel to freedom. And then finally, we're not as affected by that old conditioning anymore. And that is not the end of the story. That final stage, savoring freedom, is actually about upgrading our hardware, if you will, because the channels through which we run our pleasure, happiness, that expansion, they have been all but atrophied for women through many centuries of little to no use.
Sure.
When none of that was on the menu for women at all. So as we're expanding into making more money and enjoying our lives on a deeper level, we actually need to upgrade our system, because otherwise it's like taking your Toyota Corolla to Formula One, right? We just need to upgrade the vehicle. Right?
Right.
Get your Lamborghini or whatever is your pleasure. And that is a metaphor for continuing to rewire the nervous system and upgrade that subconscious programming to current time.
So do you think that I feel like the past several years, there's just been such a huge rise in cosmetic surgery, and now with like fillers and Botox, that it sort of stems from this, would you say?
Oh, that's such a big conversation. On the one hand, yes, the conditional worth. If what drives it is that conditional worth, like looking in the mirror and feeling like you're not enough, you need to fix yourself to be okay, to be enough, to be worthy, to be beautiful. If that's what drives it, then yeah, that's PSD, right? That's chasing that conditional worth. However, maybe, and that is not a common scenario, but let's say hypothetically, you already feel great about yourself. You already feel great about yourself. You feel wonderful about yourself. And you're just like, just for fun, just because I want to like explore that new level of how good can it get. I'm going to like enhance certain features or whatever. That is not a common scenario. I actually, I have not encountered that. But hypothetically speaking, if this is kind of a, maybe not with like cosmetic surgery and fillers as much, but like with other things, I can see it more like playing out with like makeup and dress, et cetera. But again, unfortunately, it is so rare, so freakishly rare to encounter a woman who is actually in deep appreciation of her own unconditional beauty. It is freakishly rare. I remember growing up and witnessing my mom look at herself in the mirror, and I have never ever, Margaret, never ever have seen my mother satisfied with what she saw. Never ever. Never saw her pleased with what she saw in the mirror. Maybe for a fleeting moment when she was like donning like a new outfit for a fleeting moment, and then she would start like fixing herself and like, oh, I need to lose weight, I need to, and that just runs so deep. So when this shift happens, like we see that in women in our programs. One of the huge amazing shifts that I celebrate is a woman falling in love, experiencing her unconditional beauty for the first time in her 40s, for example, right? And that to me is just world shifting. And then from that place, like she already feels like naturally beautiful. She doesn't need anything. She doesn't need enhancements. She doesn't need makeup. She doesn't need like anything to feel beautiful. She already does. And then from that place, I'm like, okay, maybe I'll play with this outfit. I'll play with this makeup or without makeup or whatever. It doesn't matter. And then she gets to play, right?
Right. Oh, wow. So I think this is so interesting because I can think of one particular very popular man that's in the social media realm. And I have always heard him talk about how you have to just work so hard day and night. You're going to wake up at 6 o'clock and then you're going to work until like midnight, and you're going to do this. And this is all the work you're going to have to do. This is the way to be successful. And I have never felt that, which is why I don't really listen to him, but that's sort of his premise around how he lives in his life. And that has I never felt like that was in alignment with me. And so I never really started following him or listening to his, I don't know if he has a podcast or not, but I never really thought of him. A lot of people love him, but I just knew that was his way of life, and it never suited me. Yet I definitely have been burnt out working emergency room and have quit. I'm someone that can easily quits jobs. By the way, when I get to a point where it's too much, the work is too much. I hate waking up so early. I hate working 13-hour shifts in a row. You're literally eating at the desk and then have a couple of bites, then go to see the next patient, come back, write your note, take another bite. It's not a way to live.
No.
It just isn't.
I remember being in private practice as a psychologist, and I had 14-hour days routinely, and I made my own schedule. Okay, I made my own schedule. It was my practice. I could have designed it any way I wanted, but my subconscious designed it in a way that I didn't even have time to pee. I would just hold it. Just sit there. And it's not our conscious design. And shifting from this unconscious design to conscious design requires uncovering and healing so that we actually feel safe. And cool things that happen with that, like I have conversations with women about starting this journey with us, this healing journey with us in our programs. And oftentimes, one of the questions comes up. It's like, can I make time for this? I'm like, well, what's your schedule like? And what's realistic for you? And there's like we get on a call like once a week, let's say, right? And I don't know if I can make time for that. I'm like, well, tell me about your schedule. Do you take lunch? Can you take a break? And oftentimes there is this look of revelation that they actually can take a break, that they can actually create boundaries around their time. And I'm like, yeah, I suppose I could. It's and it's wild. And again, it's not their fault. And they're all brilliant, accomplished women. It's not like they're missing something. It's this, again, patriarchal trauma where women's time has never belonged to women, okay? Women were expected to just keep on going and going and going and taking care of everyone. And so we feel guilty. We feel like it's not okay, like something is wrong if we actually take time for ourselves. And then even when we do, we feel guilty. Like on vacations, oftentimes it's hard to unplug. It's hard to relax. We still have that programming going. Oh, I got to be doing something. I got to be working.
Yes.
And
why
that
do we
is
do
right.
that? My gosh.
Yeah.
I'm going to say okay. So I have like maybe an hour and I think, okay, let me read. Let me catch up on some reading. And I'll do it like maybe 10, 15 minutes. I'm like, oh my God, wait, no, I need to work. And I have so many things I need to do right now. I'm just going to I'll do this later. And then later never comes. And I just end up working.
I so feel you. And I think our listeners were probably feeling this too. And a cool thing that shifts when we start shifting, when it actually begins to feel safe for us to just be and stop just like spinning in the wheel of like earning our conditional worth and playing out what our nervous system that is running hot wants us to do, constantly staying active and productive. I was recently speaking to one of our thrivers, a woman in our program who in the beginning, when she was considering this healing journey with us, she actually did not take that opportunity at first because she said, well, I have no time. And money too is a factor. So no. And then weeks went on by and her time and money situation was not improving. And somehow, she did take that leap of faith and got on this healing journey with us, which is always a leap of faith because they have no idea what's going to happen. So what happened for her was that in a matter of weeks, I was having this conversation with her, which is actually now on my website, that video of her sharing this. She said, I asked her, how are you doing with time and money now? And what she said was astonishing. Actually, she had no idea what she was going to say. She said, I have never in my life had this much time and this much money.
Wow.
Right? Something magical happens when we begin reclaiming our sovereignty and our nervous system settles to allow us to actually be. Our creativity kicks into gear. Our productivity, ironically, goes to a whole new level where we can accomplish a lot in a very short period of time. And then we can actually relax and restore and prioritize that. And that feels safe. We can give more, we can receive more. And that usually translates into the financial flow as well as just general satisfaction. Like sex life improves, the joy in connecting with your kids, if you have kids, right, goes up, and just being more comfortable in your own skin, being able to like relax and be happy as opposed to just chasing that next target and never arriving, accomplishing a lot, but not feeling happy. And that's the pandemic that we are healing together.
So good. So good. Oh, there was something else I was going to mention. Oh, yes, you were talking about degrees. And I remember that, so I have 3 degrees and I wanted to go on and get a 4th one. And I'm like, why? Why do you feel like you need another one? You just finished up a master's and there was like a postmaster's. And I'm like, oh, maybe I should do that too. Yeah. And I actually I think I applied and maybe took a couple of classes and I thought, no, I don't want to do this. I don't even need to do this in order to do the work that I'm really meant to be doing. So I never continued. But that is something I see a lot of. So how do we know whether a woman who has several degrees and highly accomplished and very successful, just a driven woman, where that's not, why can that not be just like, wow, look at how amazing, look at this woman.
Yeah.
Or versus like, oh, wow, that's some trauma happening there. Like, how do we know the difference?
Oh, gosh, Margaret. I mean, we all have trauma and we just deal with it in different ways, okay? Like if you're human, you have trauma. And just for clarity, what I mean when I say trauma is any experience that made you feel unsafe in your fullest authentic expression, physically or emotionally unsafe in your fullest authentic expression, and led to some trauma adaptations being created. Okay. So if you try that on for size, you might go, oh, fullest authentic expression. What the F is that? When did I feel safe in my fullest authentic expression? So we all have some of that going on. And that's just part of the human experience. And yes, we get to heal that and gain new degrees of freedom. How about that? Through that healing. And for our own discernment of what is driving us, just much like what we talked about in terms of enhancing our appearance, right? Playing with our beauty. If this is done in the way that I want to fix that. I don't like this in myself, right? Let me fix that. And then you quote unquote fix that and you still don't like yourself, right? Well, that's one way. Or if you are already like, oh, I am gorgeous. What happens if I do that too? Right. That's a different way.
Right.
And so with degrees, etc. I mean, there's a lot of fun and pleasure we can derive from learning and playing in that arena. And if we are playing in that arena, looking for anointment from patriarchy so that we can be deemed worthy of sharing our talents and gifts with the world. That's another way. I actually, I'm your fellow multiple degree holder, a few master's degrees and a PhD and all that. And it was a part of my path, first gaining enough kind of. It's like when you're making a differential diagnosis, like you rule things out, right? So for me, it was just gaining that initial, okay, let me excel in my studies to rule some things out, like I'm completely worthless. Like it's like you gotta start somewhere. Like, okay, I'm not worthless. I'll get some conditional worth through my studies. And it was necessary on my journey. But then I got into the deeper healing. I'm like, oh, now I got to heal from the trauma of academia. There's a lot of that. And straitjacketing that came with all my advanced degrees. And recently I had this interesting conversation with one of our thrivers who completed the entry level of our program. And then she had this epiphany, like, oh, I want to do my own thing. I actually want to, leave the organization. I want to do my own thing. I have this vision. And so she's an expert in the field, right? She's been at it for a long time. And part of her epiphany was, I'm going to go to law school so that I can do what I want to do. And I actually yelled at her with love. I just got possessed. And I was like, why on earth would you want to give patriarchy hundreds of thousands of dollars to, first of all, demolish your self-esteem, and then like give you more like conditional worth maybe, and anoint you to do something that you already know how to do? You're an expert. You can do it right now. And then thankfully she was very receptive. She was very grateful. She was like,
good.
Like, this is exactly what I needed to hear. So I always delight when I get to save a woman some money and a lot of time and self-esteem. But yeah, it's not like black and white, right? Oh, don't go to school because it's like you're trying to compensate for something. It's not like that. But be discerning and know if you're placing conditions on yourself and you're like, no, I can't do this. I need to read 100 more books to be qualified. I need another degree to be qualified. Is that true?
Right.
Yeah. Great conversation, Margaret. Love it. Loving where you're taking us.
Thank you. Well, I mean, this is just because I'm all for women out doing what they want to do out there, and whether it's getting that degree or whether it's working this job, whatever job, or if you have your own company. But I definitely see that women will be so too driven. And I don't even know if, I guess you can be too driven, because at the end of the day, I feel like a woman's body just cannot handle it. Whether, I don't know, is it fair to say compared to a man? I mean, a man can work till 9 p.m. You do that to a woman's body. I mean, there are just so many things that I see. I don't think, honestly, I mean, I've been an NP now for 20 years.
Yeah.
I don't think I have ever spoken to a man that has ever complained to me about, I'm just so tired at the end of the day. I don't really feel like getting up, and, the kids and my job, it's so stressful. I just realized this just now.
Wow.
I have never heard a man say this to me. Not once, but a woman, yes. It's almost like a given that every woman out there is tired, that they're just have so much on their plate that it's overwhelming.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of things going on here. So looking at this through the lens of intergenerational trauma and PSD is okay. So not only are women playing in the male-dominated fields created by men for men, right? All these work situations were designed by men for men.
Yes.
Right. And then they started letting women in. Okay, you get a seat at the table, maybe.
Right.
So just the way the work environment is designed and that rhythm is designed, it's not designed for women or with women in mind. That's one aspect. Another aspect is that we feel subconsciously unsafe in those situations, so that the nervous system is constantly running, and that contributes to that exhaustion, just exhausted and fatigued. And it's not only the internal thing, we get triggered all the time. It is a hostile environment. We get triggered. We get triggered by like always needing to fight for our voices to be heard. I hear it from my clients all the time. Like, she makes it to the top of the career ladder. Finally, she's at that table, right? The only woman at the table of partners and whatever, and the only person they don't listen to. So that's a huge disillusionment, and like, what the F?
Right.
Just right. And that is highly stressful and highly exhausting, having to fight for your turf all the time, and then setting boundaries and explaining things to people, and then doing emotional labor, your own emotional labor, the emotional labor for others, holding space. And you go home, you hold space for everybody else there. You manage the family. You're the CEO of your family. So that's just, the load on women is so immense. And I think that intergenerational trauma, like it plays a pretty central part in that as well, that the nervous system is always running hot. And we see it in the autoimmune conditions as well. Women are affected disproportionately. 70 to 90% of cases are women, and particularly women of color. So you start thinking about like the intergenerational stress and the trauma of oppression and how that is maybe playing out in all these things. And then you add, this quote unquote successful, high achieving career path and the stresses of that and the expectations. And also the expectation is that you're supposed to do these very advanced emotional and mental acrobatics, because you cannot be like too emotional, because you'll be labeled angry or you'll be labeled weak. Right? As a woman, the stakes are high. So you always got to like repress everything. And that takes a toll. Like, we start working with women and they have been holding that stuff in for decades.
Yeah.
Just like wearing a spacesuit, that takes a toll. And then the health takes a toll. Of course, it's got to come out one way or another. And we have the pandemic also, women going under the knife, getting hysterectomies and all sorts of stuff going on, because the war on women's bodies that patriarchy has been waging for thousands of years has turned within. We internalize all that stuff, microaggressions and aggressions and all the repressed emotions. And then it just wreaks havoc on our bodies. There's just more than one thing going on here, right?
Well, the other thing too is even companies, tell me what you think about this. What about companies that are run by women and everyone that's employed are women?
Yeah.
Now, I'm assuming that those women are still working like men. And that they're still getting burnt out, unless the woman that owns that company sets into place, like, no, you've got vacation time. You're not going to work 12 hours. You only work 8. No, you're not going to take this home to do work. You know, if the woman is putting boundaries and she's not, you know, acting as if she were the male counterpart, and so now she's expecting everyone to sort of perform like a man. Like, I think that would be bad, but I think that happens. I think that happens, right?
Oh, Margaret,
so much.
Women perpetrate patriarchy like nobody's business, right? If women did not perpetrate patriarchy, it wouldn't stand. And so, because also the only blueprints we received for how to be quote unquote successful in business were the male blueprints, doing it in the patriarchal way. Not even the male blueprints, just doing it in the patriarchal way, because, you know, men also don't get the full spectrum of their authentic expression made available to them, or people across the gender spectrum for that matter. So women totally, even like women who, they step out of corporate structure, yay, I'm free. And then she sets up business and she finds herself burning out, although she's in charge, but she's perpetrating patriarchy, and that's subconscious. Nobody sets out to do that by design. And one of the huge things that we're reimagining in our programs, we have this program for high achieving women called the Thriving Circle, where we are reimagining what running a successful business looks like, not from the place of survival and patriarchal programming, but from a place of thriving. And this is new. None of us have role models in that. There are no role models in that in the world. We're making this up as we go along. And so we're collaboratively creating this as a community. And I'm on the same journey, right? Figuring out, like, finding where that patriarchal conditioning is like hiding in me, where I need to keep on healing, where I need to keep on reclaiming my time, my vitality, how I get to play in my zone of genius and keep on building a team that is truly thriving, right? And it's hard. It's hard because we are making this up as we go. We're exploring and creating it together. So if anybody listening right now feels like joining us in that endeavor, please get in touch. Let's create a new world together. It's time.
Yeah, for sure. So tell us how can we reach you? How can my audience find you?
A great place to start is drvalerie.com, drvalerie.com/book. That's where you can download the first chapter of my book, Dip Your Toes In, and also the book resources, different practices and meditations that will support your journey through the book. And then we have those live experiences where we get to actually feel into how survival plays out in our body, how PSD plays out in our body, and we learn some techniques and practices for shifting from survival to thriving right there as a community. And we call them the Thriving Experience. The thrivingexperience.com is where you can learn more and register and join us. And it's a great way to start exploring this journey for yourself. And if you're already ready for a deeper dive you can just email me directly, Valerie@drvalerie.com, and inquire about joining your fellow world-changing women on this exploration of creating a thriving life, your work in the world, and ultimately creating a thriving world, embodying the change we want to see in the world together.
So good. Now, is that Valerie is the Dr. Valerie DR, or is it the word doctor?
DRVALERIE.
Okay. And I'll have all this in the show notes as well.
Thank you, Margaret.
Well, Valerie, thank you so much. From the minute I read your title, and I said, oh no, she needs to come on my podcast without a doubt. So thank you so much for being here. I also follow, you're also on Instagram.
Yes, Dr. Valerie Rein
on
Instagram.
Is that typically where you like to be?
Yeah, I hang out there. DMs is my pleasure. So if you want to DM me, I always welcome that. We'll chat.
Perfect. Well, I hope that whoever is listening, if this resonates with you, definitely get her book, and also just check out it's called The Thriving Experience, right?
Mm-hmm. The Thriving Experience.
Check that out. If you really are sort of done with going through life feeling utterly exhausted beyond comprehension and living that patriarchal lifestyle, I think you need to definitely learn about you and read the book, whatever you can, because we don't want to live our lives like this.
No, or pass that along to future generations. No, done.
Exactly.
Done. It's time.
It is. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today. I love your mission.
Thank you, Margaret. Likewise. And thank you, everyone, who joined us today.
Yes.
Wasn't that so eye-opening? It really, I took so much notes from that conversation, and I really do hope that it empowers you and it has you see things in a different way. And get her book. I loved her book. I'm still reading it. So if you want to learn more about her, I know she offers courses and gatherings. So I believe virtually. Head on over to margaretromero.com/episode 170. You'll find all the links there in the show notes. And thank you so much for listening this week, wherever you are in the world. Big hugs. I hope you are well and you are safe and you are healthy. I will talk to you all next week, right here. Bye for now.